Hi everybody, welcome to another global stamping video hop. My name's Jo and I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator from the UK. Today we are sharing with you projects using either our favourite punches or new punches from the new catalogue. I've chosen actually a pair of punches which do come as a pair, and they are called the Inked and Tiled Punch Pack. Now when I saw these I thought how great they would be for backgrounds and for maybe some small sentiments, or just to add in a little bit of detail really, and I was really keen to use these when I saw the subject for today's projects. So this is the card I've made. Now this is lots and lots of layers on here. I love layers. So these punches really loan themselves really well to a square card, but equally you could use them on a DL or a C6 or whatever size card you use. You just need to sort of fiddle around with your measurements just a little bit. I have pre-prepared most of the stuff for today just so that I can speed up a little bit so you don't have to sit and watch me cut lots of layers, and then we can go from there. So these papers that I've used on here and on the background here are from the Countryside Inn papers. We've got all these beautiful sort of blues, and it always reminds me of sort of Delft china. The punches themselves remind me instantly of patchwork. So as you can see, I've added a little bit of faux stitching on my card here just to add a little bit of interest to it. I know realistically, obviously the stitching would be on top of the actual pieces themselves, but we're not going to see those on there. So artistic license for our card making, but I just thought it added a little bit of interest to it. So I'm not going to remake this one. I'm going to make a different one today. But the sentiment from this one actually was from the Last Enjoy stamp set. And these little flowers here are just these little flowers which I fussy cut from there. So you can see how that one was put together. Okay, so let's have a look at today's card. So today I'm going to be using the Bright and Beautiful DSP. So this is the one that comes with the, I can remember the name of these things, Beautiful Balloons. So this comes with the Beautiful Balloons stamp set. It all coordinates really nicely. But actually these papers I absolutely love using with the Share a Milkshake stamp set. I really love this stamp set anyway, but the colours are just so beautiful to go with this. So I thought it'd be really nice to use a mixture of the two. So I'm going to start you off giving you some measurements. So this, I'm in the UK, so we're in centimetres. So my card base is 13.5 centimetres square. It's about 5 1/4 inches thereabouts, just so you know you can get an idea. So you want to cut your cardstock 27 centimetres long by 13.5. And then you're going to score at 13.5 to give you your card base. So this is Berry Burst. I've then got a white layer. So this is just normal basic white, and this is 12.8 centimetres square. And then I've chosen some pretty DSP. It's one of my favourites. I love all the mixture of colours in this. And this one is 12.5 centimetres square. So you can see I've just cut that border just 3 millimetres larger. I just like a little skinny border on it. I think it makes it sort of lift it from the page. I then have another piece of white. So this one measures 10.8 centimetres. And then I have a piece of Berry Burst again, and this one is 10.5 centimetres. So they're quite easy measurements to remember and to measure and cut. So that's our base, okay? So I'm going to start, I think we'll start by gluing some of these together, and then we can build up our pieces from there. So I'm going to glue the two top sections. And just take time just to sort of wiggle it around, try and get an even border. This is why I like using wet glue as opposed to double-sided tape, because you have that opportunity just to have a little wiggle really. And then I'm going to glue my DSP. And again, I'm going to just take a little bit of time, line it up best you can. Okay, and that I can glue straight onto my card front because that is flat glued to that. Okay, so that's the start. Just make sure that that's all lined up nicely. Okay, so I can put that to one side and we're going to start concentrating on our centre square. So as I say, these are the punches. So you've got this one with the, what's that, 8 little points, and then you've got this one with the 4 points, and they all sort of fit in together. So I have taken some of the DSP. This is great also for using scraps. So if you've got scraps of DSP, it's really good for using that up. Now, the centre one I'm not too worried about because I am going to cover that, but it is quite important that you have something in the centre that's punched with the shape, because that will give you your centre point, okay, so that you can work out from. So just make sure that you do actually have one in the centre. And I'm going to start off just positioning them as I kind of want them, okay? And I've got some different ones to go in the centre into these little gaps here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to find my centre point on my card. So I can find that either by using my lines on here, or as I'm going to do, I'm just going to take a little pencil, oops, inches. So it's 10.5, so I'm going at 5.25. I'm just going to put a little mark on all 4 sides. Don't worry too much if it's half a mil out or something. You're not going to notice it. This is a guide just to give us an idea of where we're going with it. Okay. So I'm just going to line up the opposite marks, if I can see them. There we go. And I'm just going to put a little cross in the centre. I don't need to draw it all across because it's only going to be that centrepiece that we want to line up. Okay, so this is my centre one here. So I'm just going to add some glue. Again, you can use whatever glue you wish. I just prefer the wet glue. So I should have extended those lines just very slightly. I can see, I can't see the other end, so to speak. So there we go. I can see now roughly where they are. Okay. So once you've got your first piece down, then everything else works out from that. Okay, so the next pieces I've got are using the second punch, which is this one here, and these are going to slot in to the 4 sides like so. So I've got 4 of those. These are ombre, so I've done 2 which are slightly lighter and 2 which are slightly darker. It doesn't really matter where they are, I just want to obviously build that up. So but on top of that, I'm also going to be using some of the acetate which comes with this set as well. So this comes in like this, so we've got 3 different patterns. And this is the Gold Celebrations 12 by 12 Speciality Designer Series paper. That was a mouthful. But what's great about it as well is, although it's gold, if you actually turn it over, it's actually silver on the back. So if you want to use the silver, like with the blues, for example, it works really, really well. Now, this is obviously notorious for sticking down because we want to make sure that we don't get any glue squidging out from underneath that we can see on the actual acetate itself. So what I tend to do, I use the wet glue, and what I'm going to do is just put some tiny little dots just where those silver dots are. Okay. It's really lightweight, so it doesn't need a great deal to glue. And this way the glue is going to be hidden under those circles. But what I'm actually going to do, our glue, the multi-purpose glue, once it dries, it becomes repositionable. So what will happen is, as it will dry, it will become tacky as opposed to wet and gluey, if that makes sense. So I'm going to allow that to dry whilst we're sticking these other pieces in place, and then by the time we get to it, hopefully we should be in a position to place those on top without making a mess, fingers crossed. So that goes for anything. If you've got any small little pieces of die cuts or anything like that, or little strips of paper, or you know, sometimes we use strips of paper and stuff, if you just glue it first and allow it to dry, and then once that's dry, the actual it will become tacky and you won't get any seepage or mess on your card. Now these patterns, obviously I'm using sort of the basic pattern here, that they all fit together, but you can do all sorts of things with them. So you could, if you wanted to, you can see how they would match up there. You'd have little gaps here, but I quite like that. And especially if you use DSP underneath, you would see those come through. So there's all end of possibilities with these punches, which is what I really liked about them. They actually come in a bundle with the stamp set as well. I haven't actually bought the stamp set yet because I was so drawn to the punches that I kind of just went full on ahead and ordered the actual punches. But I will no doubt get it in due course, and I should have bought the bundle at the time. But sometimes when we're in a rush to get things, we don't always think about what we're doing. So just going to line these up. Now they should all fit really nicely. If you do get one that's slightly off, just overlap it slightly. You're not going to notice it once it's all down and it's all done, so don't worry too much about that. And I just want to make sure the stars, it doesn't matter because they're all random, but I do want to get these lines in the right direction. And you can find just by sliding it up to the edges, it's really easy to line up. I love the colours in this paper, it's so, so pretty. Again, I'm just doing alternates, so I've got stars, opposite stars, or diagonally across the stars. And then I just want to make sure that I get that one up the right way so that my lines are all going the same direction. Okay. So now that I've done that, if you want to, you can add some faux stitching. I'm just going to add some around the outside edge this time, I think. And I'm just using just a plain white gel pen. Now these are notorious for giving up the ghost just as you're about to use them. So fingers crossed. I did test it just before I started recording. So fingers crossed we'll be okay. So I'm just adding little white stitching around the outside edge. I think the whites are notorious for drying up because they've got more of a chalky texture, so you do have to sort of wiggle them around a little bit sometimes just to make sure that they work nicely. Now I have bought expensive ones, I have bought cheap ones, and they all do the same. So my advice is if you're purchasing a white gel pen, just buy a cheapish one and keep it up so that the ink is always running down, and then you generally find you do have to clean the nib just slightly of that chalkiness every time you use it, but it should be okay. Okay, so I'm just going to add faux stitching just around the outside edge of this one. I'm not actually going to go in between like I did with the blue one, because I'm sure you all well know how to add faux stitching to your projects. And if you're a whiz with a sewing machine, you could actually do it with a sewing machine if you wanted to. I'm not. Come on, pen. Just this one edge. There we go. So it started to sort of dry a little bit on the end, and I was having trouble getting it out, but just a little sort of squiggle in it started to come back to me. There we go. So it just adds, I think, that little pop of interest. It's nothing particular. It's just added that pop of interest. Now you can see on these they've started to dry, so they're just going tacky in places. There's one or two little blobs that maybe are still a little bit wet. I'm actually going to wipe a little bit off that one. There's quite a lot on there, but they are starting to go off. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the rest of the card together, and then we'll go back to those. So I just need to be careful not to put something on them. Generally, if I'm doing this, I have a little tray, which is actually a tray. I think it was off an airline. You know, the little trays they give you your dinners on. Somebody I knew worked for an airline, and she managed to get me a load, which I use. So, you know, but anything is fine. A little tray or a silicone mat or something like that is absolutely fine. So this time I'm going to add these on with, look at those colours, aren't they pretty? So I'm going to add Stampin' Dimensionals this time, just to raise these up, which I also did on the other one. But you don't have to. If you want it to go flat, especially if you're sending it in the post, you might want to leave it flatter and just add your sentiment onto dimensionals. It's entirely up to you. Sure which ones I've done and which ones I haven't. Now let's have a quick look. Oh, no, they're all done. Okay, so I'm going to pick my best edge. So I am going to go like here. It's hard for me to see whilst I'm filming, but hopefully that's reasonably straight. So what I've done now, I've actually created my topper for this one. So I've used the Stitched Shapes dies, which I always have trouble saying. No, it's not stitched, it's Stylish Shapes dies. So it's these ones with the circles, the squares and the little banners. So what I've done is I've created my little ice cream here, which, as I say, came from the Share a Milkshake stamp set. And I used the coordinating dies for that to cut the little elements from. There we are, there's the three there. And then I've just used dimensionals to raise that onto there. So the actual dish is very burst, but I stamped off for the background, and then it's full ink for the topper. That's Lemon Lolly, one of my favourite new colours, for the ice cream, or sorbet maybe, or maybe a vanilla ice cream. And then the little spoon, I've used Blueberry Bushel. What I've done is I've stamped that off as well, because Blueberry Bushel is quite dark, and I wanted just something a little bit lighter. Now, the other thing that I've got on here is my greeting. So this comes from the Beautiful Balloons. Now, I know this is slightly smaller because this is shown at 85% by the looks of things. But you can see also my shape has changed slightly. So if I can show you very quickly, I grab the stamp. So this is the stamp. And as you can see, it's a little bit more spread out. So if I put it over the top, you can see it would spread out. So what I do, because of being polymer, what you can do is I just pick my stamp up, and then you can very carefully manipulate it into a slightly different shape. So don't think that the finished shape is what you've got. You can manipulate that just to take account of whatever shape you're using. So I've used a slightly smaller circle, so that it doesn't show quite up at the top, but it just meant that I could use it for my sentiment. So just a little tip there. So the polymer stamps are great for that because you can manipulate them just very slightly. Okay, so how are we doing? So these are almost now gone completely clear. So you can possibly, that's still a little bit white, that one, but that'll be okay. And you can see these little dots have gone virtually clear on here now. So when I pop them on top of my DSP and I stick them down, you can see I've got no glue seepage whatsoever, and you cannot see the glue. So it means that you're literally able to attach them without any risk. So highly recommend, if you don't do it already, just think about using the multi-purpose glue as a repositionable. Can also be good for attaching things like ribbons and things like that. Now I don't suggest you put the glue onto the ribbon, because if it's absorbent, then it's going to actually take that into the ribbon itself. But if you know you're going to put a straight piece of ribbon across here, you could do some little dots, allow it to dry so it goes tacky, and then your ribbon's going to stick on that beautifully. Okay, so I'm just going to stick these down. Last one. There we go. So as you see, they are all now stuck. And the beauty of them as well is if you haven't quite got them in the right place, you can still lift them. Now, I am just a little bit wet here, but you can lift them and they won't leave any residue whatsoever once they're fully dry. So it's really useful for all sorts of things, really. Okay, so this is my little sentiment that I'm going to pop on top. So I'm going to add some dimensionals onto the back of that as well. Now, if you haven't got square envelopes, you can make them quite easily. They're probably one of the easiest things to make. So, and if you're like me and kept your envelope maker from a few years back, it makes it even easier. So I know this is going to be covered and it's sad, but I think it just warrants itself for something in the middle. And I did contemplate adding some ribbon underneath it as well, but I thought it looked lovely just the way it was, because I love all these colours that have popped out of this to make it really bright and cheerful. So there we go. So that's the new inked and tiled punch pack. So as I say, they are a pair, so you can buy them together. So you've automatically got the matching set so that you can build up your designs as you wish. So I hope you like that today, and I'm looking forward to seeing what everyone else has decided to use. And I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.